The night I woke up in that cold hospital bed, I waited for my phone to buzz. For my parents, my brother, anyone. But the silence was louder than my own heartbeat. Not one message. Not one visit. I thought I was dying and they didn't care. But what they didn't know. That moment of betrayal was the spark that turned my life into a storm they could never escape from. If you've ever been abandoned, underestimated, or written off by the very people who were supposed to love you most, then you'll understand every word of what I'm about to share. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and get ready, because this isn't just a story about heartbreak. This is a story about revenge served colder than a hospital ward at midnight. My name is Cora, and I will never forget the way the air smelled that night. Antiseptic, sharp, and cold. The kind of smell that seeps into your skin and reminds you that you're just another patient in a long corridor of broken bodies. I opened my eyes slowly, the fluorescent lights above flickering like some cruel joke, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming. My chest ached, my throat burned, and there was a faint beeping from the monitor at my side. I shifted and winced. My ribs screamed with pain. That's when it hit me. I was in a hospital bed. Alone. The last thing I remembered was collapsing at work. My heart had raced so fast I thought it might claw its way out of my chest. The next thing, darkness. And now is. The first thing I did when I managed to reach for my phone was check for notifications. Surely someone would have called, right? My parents, my brother, maybe even a friend. But the screen was blank. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. I told myself it was still early. Maybe they didn't know yet. But as the hours passed, reality set in. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, replacing 4 bags, scribbling notes onto clipboards. Each time the door creaked open, my heart jumped. Each time I thought it might be family. But no. I stared at the ceiling tiles until they blurred into one white mass. The beeping of the monitor became the rhythm of my loneliness. My name is Cora, and I will never forget the way the air smelled that night. Antiseptic, sharp, and cold. The kind of smell that seeps into your skin and reminds you that you're just another patient in a long corridor of broken bodies. I opened my eyes slowly, the fluorescent lights above flickering like some cruel joke, and for a moment, I thought maybe I was dreaming. My chest ached, my throat burned, and there was a faint beeping from the monitor at my side. I shifted and winced. My ribs screamed with pain. That's when it hit me. I was in a hospital bed. Alone. The last thing I remembered was collapsing at work. My heart had raced so fast I thought it might claw its way out of my chest. The next thing, darkness. And now is. The first thing I did when I managed to reach for my phone was check for notifications. Surely someone would have called, right? My parents, my brother, maybe even a friend. But the screen was blank. No missed calls. No messages. Nothing. I told myself it was still early. Maybe they didn't know yet. But as the hours passed, reality set in. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, replacing 4 bags, scribbling notes onto clipboards. Each time the door creaked open, my heart jumped. Each time I thought it might be family. But no. I stared at the ceiling tiles until they blurred into one white mass. The beeping of the monitor became the rhythm of my loneliness. To understand why this moment cut so deep, you need to know something about my family. I was the youngest of 3. My brother Daniel was the golden child. My sister Lauren was the ambitious one, the one my parents bragged about at dinner parties. Me? I was the quiet one, the one they introduced with soft smiles and dismissive phrases like, "Oh, that's just Cora. She's figuring herself out." I never realized how much that phrase stung until I got older. Figuring myself out? As if I wasn't worth paying attention to until I became useful to them. At family dinners, Daniel would dominate conversations with tales of his new job promotions, his flashy new car, his girlfriend's latest achievements. Lauren would share stories of her internships abroad, her career goals, her expensive tastes. And me? If I tried to talk about something I was excited about, like the book I'd been writing or the painting I'd sold at a local art fair, the table would fall silent, then pivot back to Daniel's next big thing. That night in the hospital, as I lay there with N4 dripping into my veins, I realized something. I wasn't just invisible. I was disposable. At 2 a.m., I pressed the call button for the nurse. My chest felt tight, and panic clawed at my throat. A kind-looking woman in scrubs appeared, her badge reading, Nurse Kelly. She smiled softly. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" I wanted to say lonely, terrified, forgotten. But all that came out was a whisper, "I'm okay." Her eyes lingered on me for a moment, as if she could see right through the lie. "Do you have anyone coming to sit with you? Family? Friends?" I swallowed hard. They know I'm here. They'll come." But they didn't. By sunrise, my phone still hadn't buzzed. Nurse Kelly brought me breakfast on a tray, and even that simple act, the kindness of buttering my toast and asking if I wanted tea, broke me. I felt tears burn at the corners of my eyes. Why was a stranger caring more about me than my own family? By the second day, I stopped pretending. When my parents finally answered my call, I expected at least some concern. My voice cracked as I said, "Mom, Dad, I'm in the hospital." I collapsed at work. There was a pause, a shuffling noise, then my mother's voice, cool and distracted. "Oh, Cora, that's unfortunate. But you'll be fine, won't you? We've got dinner with the Hendersons tonight. We'll check in later, okay?" Later. My father added nothing. Just a muffled grunt before the line cut out. I stared at the phone in my hand like it had betrayed me. Not even my parents. Not Daniel. Not Lauren. Not anyone. And that's when the realization sank in with a weight so heavy I could barely breathe. I could vanish, right here in this sterile white room, and my family wouldn't notice until they needed something from me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the 4 from my arm and storm out into the night. But my body was too weak, my spirit too fractured. Instead, I lay there, listening to the beeping, and made a quiet promise to myself. Never again. If they couldn't show up for me at my lowest, then they didn't deserve me at my best. I felt something harden inside me. The kind of resolve that only comes after you've been completely broken. That night, as Nurse Kelly tucked a blanket around me and whispered, "You're stronger than you think, sweetheart," I believed her. For the first time, I believed maybe I could build something without them. I didn't know how, not yet. I didn't have a plan. But lying in that bed, staring at the ceiling, I pictured a future where I wouldn't need my parents' approval. Where Daniel's arrogance wouldn't define me. Where Lauren's constant achievements wouldn't overshadow me. A future where, when they came crawling back, as I knew deep down they someday would, I would have the power to decide whether to let them in. That thought, just the faint outline of revenge, kept me alive in that cold, sterile room. Because nothing burns brighter than the fire lit by betrayal. And my family had just poured gasoline all over me. The days that followed blurred into each other, a cycle of fluorescent lights, nurse rounds, and the hollow ache of silence. My phone never buzzed. No flowers arrived. Not a single card or visit. Even when the doctors explained I'd collapsed because of untreated stress and exhaustion, nobody came to ask why I'd been pushing myself so hard or if I needed support. I had spent my entire life orbiting around my family, always hoping for their attention, their validation, their love. But the truth was undeniable now. They didn't see me at all. I was invisible. The irony was that the only person who noticed me was someone I had never met before. Nurse Kelly. She had a way of speaking that softened the edges of the sterile hospital room. She asked questions, not about the monitors or the test results, but about me. What I liked to read. What my favorite tea was. Whether I painted more landscapes or portraits. Every conversation was like a thread stitching my broken spirit back together. She didn't know it, but she was planting something inside me, the belief that I was worth being cared about. That maybe the problem wasn't me, it was them. One morning, when she handed me my chart to look over, I noticed something scrawled at the bottom in her neat handwriting. "She has more strength than she knows." My throat tightened as I read it. That note meant more than any lecture from my parents ever had. When I was finally discharged, I half expected someone, anyone, from my family to offer to pick me up. But when I called, Daniel answered and said flatly, "I'm busy, Cora. Can't you just Uber?" Then he hung up. So that's what I did. I climbed into the backseat of a car driven by a stranger, carrying nothing but a plastic hospital bag and a hollow pit in my chest where family was supposed to be. The apartment I returned to was small, almost cramped, with peeling wallpaper and mismatched furniture. But it was mine. For the first time, I looked at it not as a symbol of failure, but as a blank slate. For walls where I could build something on my own terms. I sat on my couch that night, staring at the ceiling, and whispered into the silence, "They'll regret this." In the weeks that followed, I focused on getting stronger. My body was frail, my energy low, but I started with small steps. Short walks, simple meals, practicing deep breaths when the anger threatened to consume me. I poured everything else into my art. I had always painted on the side, but now it became my lifeline. Canvas after canvas filled with color and movement, every brushstroke a release of the bitterness lodged in my chest. At first, no one cared. My family certainly didn't. If anything, Lauren scoffed when she saw one of my paintings during a video call. "You're still doing that? Don't you think it's time you got serious, Cora? That's not a career." Her words stung, but instead of crumbling like before, I felt a strange calm. She didn't understand, and she never would. But strangers did. I started posting my work online, timid at first, then with growing confidence. The comments trickled in. "This is beautiful. Do you sell prints? I'd love to commission something." For the first time in my life, people wanted something from me, not because they were obligated by blood, but because they genuinely valued what I created. The first time I made a sale, $75 for a small portrait, I cried. Not because of the money, but because it was proof that I wasn't invisible. Proof that I had worth. From there, things snowballed. I learned about online shops, built a simple website, and started offering custom work. Commissions poured in: weddings, pets, family portraits. Each time I delivered, clients wrote back with words my own family never gave me. "This is amazing. You're so talented." Thank you. Still, I never stopped thinking about the hospital. About the silence. About my mother's voice dismissing me with casual indifference, as if her youngest child's collapse was just an inconvenience between dinner parties. That memory became fuel. Every late night I worked, every risk I took, every brush stroke, it was all driven by the image of their empty chairs by my hospital bed. Money started to come in. At first enough to cover bills, then enough to upgrade my supplies, then more than I ever expected. I reinvested, expanded, learned digital design to complement my traditional work. Within 2 years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Galleries reached out. A small publishing house commissioned me for book covers. My website generated steady sales. I even started mentoring other artists, helping them build what I had built. Meanwhile, my family barely noticed. Daniel bragged constantly on social media about his important corporate job, though I knew from quiet whispers he was barely holding on to it. Lauren flaunted luxury vacations and her fiancé's flashy gifts, even while drowning in debt. And my parents? They were too busy preserving appearances at their country club to ask how I was doing. It didn't hurt anymore. Not in the same way. It fueled me. Every absence, every dismissal, every insult, they all became bricks in the foundation of the empire I was building. And then came the moment that shifted everything. An email from a major art foundation. They wanted to feature my work in an international exhibit. They would cover costs, travel, accommodations. My pieces would hang beside artists I had idolized since I was a child. I sat at my desk, reading the email over and over, tears streaming down my face. I had done this. Me. The girl who had been left alone in a hospital bed while her family laughed over dinner with the Hendersons. The girl who had been called unserious, invisible, unworthy. When the exhibit opened, I walked into that grand hall in a simple black dress, my heart pounding, and saw my paintings lit under spotlights, admired by strangers from around the world. Cameras flashed. People asked for interviews. For the first time, I wasn't just Cora, the overlooked youngest child. I was Cora the artist. And here's the thing about success, it echoes. Word travels fast when someone underestimated suddenly shines. That's when the messages started. My mother's voice on the phone, saccharine and sweet. "Oh, darling, we're so proud of you. Why didn't you tell us sooner? We'd love to come to one of your shows." Lauren's texts, dripping with fake enthusiasm. Hey sis, congrats on the exhibit. So amazing. By the way, could you maybe help me with a little loan? Things are tight. Even Daniel, who hadn't called me once during my recovery, suddenly wanted to grab lunch and catch up. I stared at their words on my screen. The same family who hadn't shown up when I was gasping for air in a hospital bed. And I realized the revenge I had dreamed of had already begun. Not with dramatic confrontation, not with screaming matches, but with success. With silence. With the undeniable proof that I didn't need them, while they suddenly realized they might need me. That night, I lay in bed and thought about Nurse Kelly's words. You're stronger than you think. She had been right. Stronger didn't mean harder. It didn't mean colder. It meant building something so undeniable that the people who ignored me had no choice but to see me. And now, for the first time in my life, I held the power. The messages didn't stop. At first, they came like occasional taps on my phone screen, short, polite notes from my mother or Lauren. But soon they turned into a flood. My father suddenly remembered my birthday, sending a stiff text that said, "Proud of you, Cora. Hope to celebrate soon." Daniel called 3 times in 1 week, his voice unnaturally upbeat, as if he thought if he smiled hard enough through the phone I'd forget every time he dismissed me. I didn't answer right away. I let their messages pile up, sitting unread. For years I had been the one begging for crumbs of their attention. Now the roles had reversed, and it was intoxicating. Still, part of me wanted to hear them squirm. So one afternoon, I picked up when Lauren called. Her voice was sugary, but beneath it I heard the desperation. "Cora, finally. I've been dying to talk to you. I saw your feature in that art magazine. Oh my God, you're famous now. You must be making a fortune." She laughed a little too loudly, like it was rehearsed. Then came the slip, casual but calculated. "You know, I've been having some financial trouble. Nothing major, of course, but if you could just help me with a loan, I'd pay you back right away." My grip on the phone tightened. A loan. The same sister who once rolled her eyes at my paintings and told me to get serious was now asking me for money. I almost laughed, but I kept my tone even. "I'll think about it," I said. Her sigh of relief on the other end told me everything. She wasn't calling to celebrate me. She was calling to use me. Daniel wasn't any better. Over coffee, he leaned in like we were old friends, his cologne too strong, his smile stretched thin. "You know, sis, I've always believed in you," he said, stirring his cup. "And now that you're doing so well, maybe we could go in on a business venture together. Something big. You've got the capital, I've got the brains." He winked. I nearly choked on my drink. This was the same brother who once told me I'd never make a living off silly doodles. I didn't commit to anything, just smiled faintly and let him ramble. Inside, though, I was boiling. They thought they could waltz back into my life, rewrite history, and leech off what I'd built without ever apologizing. No acknowledgement of the hospital. No mention of the silence. Just greed dressed up as family concern. The real test came when my parents invited me to dinner. My mother's text was formal, almost like an RSVP. "We'd love to celebrate your success. Come to the house Sunday night." I almost deleted it, but curiosity tugged at me. What would they say to my face? Would they pretend the past never happened, or would they finally own up to it? That Sunday, I drove up the long, manicured driveway of the house I'd once called home. The windows glowed warm in the evening light, but all I felt was cold. My mother greeted me at the door with an embrace that felt more like a performance than affection. My father stood stiffly behind her, nodding as if I were a guest instead of their daughter. Dinner was exactly what I expected. Polished silverware, expensive wine, shallow conversation. They asked about my work, but their questions were laced with envy. "So how much does a piece like that sell for?" my father asked, his brows rising when I answered. Lauren chimed in with, "Wow, you must have so much money saved up." Daniel added, "Imagine what you could do if you invested smartly like I do." Not once did anyone say, "We're sorry we weren't there." Not once did they mention the hospital, the nights I spent alone wondering if I mattered. They just saw me as a resource, a bank account, a way to prop up their crumbling facades. As I drove home that night, their voices echoed in my head. The hunger in their eyes wasn't for connection. It was for control. And for the first time, I didn't just feel anger. I felt clarity. They hadn't changed, but I had. And I finally understood that the best revenge wouldn't be screaming at them or cutting them off entirely. It would be showing them again and again that I didn't need them, while they would come to realize they desperately needed me. I started to prepare. Quietly, methodically. I built walls around my success that they couldn't penetrate. My finances went into trusts they couldn't touch. My business expanded with contracts that had my name alone. I made sure every step I took left no space for them to insert themselves. At the same time, I played the part they expected, the polite daughter, the agreeable sister. I didn't give them confrontation. I gave them just enough hope to keep coming back. Each encounter revealed more of their desperation. Lauren's requests grew bolder: tuition for her fiancé's MBA program, help with credit card bills. Daniel hinted at temporary loans to cover unexpected expenses. My parents, once so proud of their independence, subtly asked if I could chip in for house repairs. They were drowning, and I was their lifeline. But I never gave them what they wanted. Instead, I dangled the possibility, watching them twist themselves into knots, waiting for a generosity that would never come. Every polite smile I offered, every vague promise, was another layer of revenge. Because I knew what they didn't, I held the power now, and they couldn't stand it. And the best part? They still had no idea I remembered every detail of that hospital stay. They thought time had erased it, that success had healed the wound. But that memory was carved into me like stone. And when the moment came to truly make them face what they had done, I would make sure they never forgot it either. For now, though, I savored the slow burn. Revenge didn't have to be loud. Sometimes, the sweetest kind was silent, drawn out, and served in careful, deliberate doses. And every time my phone buzzed with their desperate pleas, I smiled. Because the girl they once left invisible had become the woman they couldn't ignore. The night of the gallery opening arrived like the sudden hush before a storm. I wore a simple black dress, nothing flashy, because the point wasn't to shimmer. It was to be seen, to be recognized for work I'd poured my soul into. The space was old brick and glass, the kind of room that made whispers sound like proclamations. My paintings hung in a slow arc, each one paired with a short line of text that read like an accusation. The empty chair, late-night calls, the sound of silence. People moved through the rooms, wine glasses chiming, faces lit by the warm glow of spotlights. Cameras flashed. I answered questions with calm, measured words, letting the light do the rest. Halfway through the evening, the room dimmed. A hush fell that made everyone lean in by instinct. I felt my pulse in my throat, steady and certain. On the far wall, the largest canvas, my centerpiece, was revealed. It wasn't a portrait. It was a photograph I had staged, a hospital bed made impeccably, sheets smoothed, a single chair pulled close to the bed, empty. Beside it, embroidered in my own messy handwriting, "We sat with Grandma when she died. We missed the night you collapsed." I watched them watch it. I watched the color drain from faces I'd known all my life. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Daniel's jaw clenched so hard I thought it might crack. Lauren's eyes flicked away toward the bar, then back like she was trying to detach herself from the image. They had thought this would be an evening to bask in my reflected glory. Instead, it felt like a mirror held up to the very things they refused to see. Then I stepped forward to speak. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I let my voice be a calm, unhurried thing that made people lean in because they wanted to understand how a person who had been invisible could suddenly be so composed. "There are paintings here tonight," I said, "but they aren't just pictures. They are promises I made to myself the night I woke up in a hospital and waited for people who never came." I let that sink in. The air tasted metallic with the wine on people's tongues, but underneath it all was something colder: guilt. I had more prepared. Months earlier, when Lauren begged me for a temporary loan, when Daniel tried to rope me into some fuzzy business scheme, I'd saved their messages. I'd saved my mother's clipped call the night I told her I'd been admitted. "We'll check in later." They were petty things, words that in most families would have been washed away by time. But that night, in front of an audience who respected me as an artist, those petty words landed like stones. The curator clicked the remote, and one by one, my family's messages flickered up on the wall in soft white letters. Texts asking for money, voicemails of solicitous concern that evaporated into requests for favors, the very line from my mother about the Hendersons' dinner. The room exhaled. My father shifted in his chair as if an invisible hand had pressed into his back. He hadn't braved a direct apology, but his mouth moved. No words came out that made sense. Only a throat clearing that spoke volumes. Daniel's face reddened. He looked like a man suddenly aware he'd been caught on camera doing something shameful. Lauren's lips were trembling, not from sadness so much as from the shock of being called out in public. After the projection, I walked them through the rest of the exhibit as if I were leading a tour. I explained the technique behind each piece, the symbolism, the way a certain blue represented night spent waiting. I kept my voice steady. I described the hospital lights and the antiseptic smell. I described the small mercy of Nurse Kelly's presence. I explained how kindness from strangers had taught me what I deserved, to be seen, to be valued. I watched, almost clinically, as their posture shifted from entitlement to shame. When the formal part of the night ended and people filtered back to cocktails and congratulations, my parents approached the small circle of family clustered near the exit. My mother's greeting was soft and uncertain. "Cora," she said, fingers fluttering. "We." But she stopped, as if the rest of the sentence had lodged in her throat. My father stood beside her, awkward as a man wearing a suit 2 sizes too small. "We're proud of you," he managed, the words hollow in a way that made my skin prickle. They wanted a quick absolution, a way to make the evening about mutual pride again. I could have given it to them. I could have wrapped my arms around them, let the cameras capture a family reconciled. Instead, I reached into my bag and took out a small envelope. It was heavy with a legal weight I'd earned, documents I had prepared weeks earlier when the family first began their soft campaign of requests. It was a trust, the kind that locks money behind conditions, that requires accountability and presence, that cannot be accessed on a whim. "I set this up after the hospital," I said. I watched their faces as I explained the terms. Funds for education, for medical emergencies, for genuine needs, but only accessible after a demonstrated period of consistent support and genuine involvement. "You can apply," I told them, "if you can show you were there when it mattered." There was a silence so absolute someone knocked over a glass in the other room, and it sounded like thunder. Lauren's eyes widened. "You what? This is ridiculous." She tried to laugh it off, but the laugh cracked. Daniel's smile faltered. My father's fingers dug into the arm of his chair. They hadn't expected a ledger. They'd expected to charm me back, to slip into familiar roles and take without giving. Instead, the rules had changed. My silence of the hospital had become a contract of care. Then the most satisfying moment arrived. Nurse Kelly walked in. She had been seated near the back, modest, watching. She moved forward and put a hand on my shoulder, not in a possessive way, but in the solid, quiet way someone offers when they know the truth of another's pain. "She's not the same scared girl who was brought in 2 years ago," she said, voice low so only the nearest could hear. "She chose this. She saved herself, and now she's choosing to protect herself." My mother's face crumpled then, the first genuine break. "Cora," she whispered, making an attempt that had nothing to do with pride. It was the barest thing, a tremor of regret. But regret is a funny relief. It can't rebuild what it tore down. It only stains the hands you offer afterwards. I felt relief flood through me like warm light. Not joy. This wasn't a victory dance. It was a quiet lifting, the easing of an ache that had accumulated for years. The revenge I'd wanted wasn't to see them humiliated, so much as to see them required to show up when they said they would. The trust was a way to see whether their words could match action. The exhibit was a way to make them look at what they'd done. Watching them fumble for apologies that wouldn't undo the past, I understood the final truth. People rarely change because you shame them in public. They change because you stop letting them take you for granted. That night, they learned that lesson under soft lights and the scrutiny of strangers. I learned how to stand in my own light without collapsing into bitterness. When the last guest left and the gallery emptied, I sat in the chair that had been my subject and let the quiet roll around me. The monitor of my life no longer beeped in alarm. It ticked steadily, like a clock that had finally been set right. Nurse Kelly squeezed my hand. "You did what you needed to do," she said. I closed my eyes and let myself finally breathe. Weeks after the gallery opening, the ripples still hadn't settled. My name was being spoken in circles my family couldn't enter. Articles online praised my boldness and fearless honesty. Collectors emailed with new commissions. Invitations to exhibits poured in. For the first time, my calendar was too full to accommodate everyone. But the most telling change wasn't in the art world. It was in my family. They no longer spoke to me with arrogance. Their calls weren't filled with casual dismissals or entitled requests. Now their voices cracked around the edges, nervous, careful. My mother's texts no longer demanded, they asked. Daniel's tone no longer bragged, it wavered. Lauren's laughter, once sharp with superiority, was fragile, tinged with something that almost sounded like respect. I didn't rush to answer them. Sometimes I left their messages unread for days, just as they had once left me alone for nights in that sterile hospital room. And when I did reply, I kept my words measured, neutral, as though speaking with acquaintances, not family. They hated it, though they'd never admit it. For people who once thrived on my silence, nothing was more punishing than realizing I no longer owed them explanations, time, or affection. The trust fund I created remained untouched by them, its conditions unmet. They asked about it once, haltingly, and I reminded them gently, it's there if you ever truly show up. Actions, not words. The quiet that followed was heavier than anything I'd heard from them before. What they didn't realize was that the revenge had already done its work. It wasn't about them signing forms or following rules. It was about watching them face themselves in that gallery, stripped bare under the weight of their own neglect. They had to see me succeed without them, to witness the very thing they dismissed become the force that defined me. Sometimes at night, I still think back to that first hospital stay. The sharp antiseptic smell, the hollow beep of machines, the weight of loneliness pressing into me until I thought I might suffocate. That memory doesn't sting anymore. It fuels me. It's proof of where I came from, proof of why I built what I built. And I think of Nurse Kelly, the way she tucked the blanket around me, the way she whispered, "You're stronger than you think." She was right. I was stronger. Stronger than their silence, stronger than their absence, stronger than the invisible box they kept me in for years. Now, when I walk into a gallery filled with my work, I don't look for my parents' faces in the crowd. I don't wait for Daniel's approval or Lauren's applause. I listen instead to strangers who find pieces of themselves in my art. Their words mean more than my family's ever did. And when I paint, I do it not as the forgotten youngest child, but as the woman who chose to be seen, even if she had to shine alone. My family will live with what they did, or rather, what they failed to do. Maybe one day they'll truly change, though I no longer wait for it. That chapter closed the moment I realized I didn't need their presence to validate my worth. The greatest revenge wasn't making them pay or cutting them off forever. It was thriving without them, making their absence the loudest thing in the room. And that's the lesson I want to leave behind. Sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who wound you deepest. Sometimes the only way to heal is to stop asking for their presence and start building a life where their absence no longer matters. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes it's as simple as standing in the light they never thought you'd reach and letting them watch from the shadows. So if you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or left behind by the very people who should have stood beside you, remember this: you're stronger than they think. And one day, the silence they gave you might just be the very fuel that lights your fire. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And of course, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Because sometimes the sweetest justice is living so fully that those who doubted you can do nothing but watch.